What happens when a single phone call unravels a neighborhood, a marriage, and a carefully guarded secret? It was a humid July evening in Virginia Beach, the kind where the air clung to your skin like a second shirt. I just returned from my final Navy tour, a grueling 18 months aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, and all I wanted was to collapse into the arms of my wife, Commander Elena Vasquez. She was my anchor, my lighthouse through every storm, both literal and figurative. But as I pulled into our quiet cul-de-sac, I saw flashing blue lights cutting through the dusk. My heart sank. Elena stood on our front lawn, arms crossed, her face a mask of controlled fury. 3 police officers surrounded her, their hands resting on holsters, their voices low but tense. Across the street, Karen Mitchell, our nosy neighbor with a penchant for stirring trouble, stood on her porch, phone in hand, smirking like she'd just won the lottery. I parked my truck and jogged over, my duffel bag still slung over my shoulder. "Elena, what's going on?" I asked, my voice cracking from exhaustion. She didn't turn to me, her eyes locked on the lead officer. "Karen called the cops. Said I was trespassing on my own property." I blinked, disbelief washing over me. "Trespassing? This is our house." Karen's voice cut through the air like a knife. "I didn't know who she was. She's never here, and I saw her sneaking around the backyard. I'm protecting the neighborhood." I turned to Karen, my patience already fraying. "Sneaking? She's been deployed, Karen. She's a Navy commander. This is her home." Karen's smirk faltered, but she doubled down. "Well, how was I supposed to know? She doesn't act like a military wife." The words hit me like a slap. Elena wasn't just a military wife. She was a decorated officer, outranking every cop on the scene, with a chest full of medals from tours in the Persian Gulf and South China Sea. But Karen, with her perfectly manicured lawn and self-appointed role as neighborhood watchdog, didn't know that. She didn't know Elena had spent months commanding operations under pressure that would break most people. She didn't know Elena had saved lives, including mine, more times than I could count. The lead officer, a burly man with a buzz cut, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we just need to verify your identity, and we'll clear this up." Elena's jaw tightened, but she nodded, pulling her military ID from her pocket. The officer's eyes widened as he read it. "Commander Vasquez," he said, his tone shifting from authority to respect. He handed the ID back, then turned to his colleagues. "We're done here." Karen's face reddened. "Wait, what? You're just letting her go?" "I saw her climbing over the fence." The officer sighed. "Ma'am, she's the homeowner, and she outranks me by about 3 pay grades." The other officers stifled chuckles, but Karen wasn't laughing. She stormed down her porch steps, pointing a manicured finger at Elena. "This isn't over. I know what I saw." I wanted to scream at her, to tell her to mind her own business, but Elena's hand on my arm stopped me. "Let it go, Marcus," she whispered. "She's not worth it." That should have been the end of it. A misunderstanding, a quick resolution, and a chance to move on. But Karen wasn't the type to let things go. And neither, it turned out, was the truth. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sight of Elena in her running gear, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes shadowed with something heavier than fatigue. "You okay?" I asked, pouring myself a cup. She nodded, but it was curt, mechanical. "Just need to run it off." I watched her leave, a knot forming in my stomach. Elena wasn't just tough, she was unbreakable. Or so I thought. But something about last night had rattled her. And it wasn't just Karen's nonsense. I chalked it up to the stress of her last deployment, the one she rarely talked about. She'd been stationed in a volatile region, leading a classified operation. I hadn't pressed her for details. I knew better than to ask about things she couldn't share. That afternoon, I was mowing the lawn when a stranger pulled up in a black sedan. He was middle-aged, with salt and pepper hair and a suit that screamed government. He introduced himself as Agent Daniel Harper, Navy Intelligence. "Mr. Vasquez," he said, his voice low, "I need to speak with your wife. It's urgent." My pulse quickened. "She's out running. What's this about?" He hesitated, his eyes scanning the street. It's classified. But I need to know if she's been acting unusual. I frowned. Unusual how? Before he could answer, Elena jogged up, her face flushed from her run. She froze when she saw Harper, her expression unreadable. Agent Harper, she said coolly. Didn't expect to see you here. Harper didn't waste time. We need to talk. Now. They stepped inside, leaving me on the porch, my mind racing. What was going on? Why was Navy intelligence at our house? I tried to eavesdrop, but their voices were too low, muffled by the walls. When Elena emerged 20 minutes later, she looked like she'd aged a decade. Marcus, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk. That night, over a bottle of bourbon, Elena told me everything. Or at least, as much as she could without breaking her oaths. Her last mission hadn't just been dangerous, it had been a moral quagmire. She'd been tasked with extracting a high-value asset, a defector with information that could prevent a global crisis. But the operation went sideways. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, and Elena had to make a call. Save the asset or save the innocents. She chose the latter, disobeying a direct order. They're investigating me, she said, her voice hollow. They think I compromised national security. I stared at her, my heart pounding. But you saved lives. She shook her head. Doesn't matter. The asset was critical. They're saying I put the mission at risk. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. There's more, she said, her eyes glistening. Karen, she didn't just call the cops because she thought I was trespassing. She's been watching me. She saw me meeting with someone last week, a contact from the operation. She thinks I'm up to something illegal. I laughed, bitter and incredulous. Karen? She's just a busybody with too much time on her hands. Elena didn't smile. She recorded it, Marcus. She sent the video to the police. And now it's in the hands of naval intelligence. The room spun. Karen, with her petty grudges and overzealous neighborhood watch, had stumbled into something far bigger than she could understand. And now it was threatening to destroy Elena's career, maybe her life. The next week was a blur of tension. Elena was called into a closed-door hearing with naval intelligence. I wasn't allowed to attend, but I waited outside, my stomach in knots. When she emerged, her face was pale, her uniform crisp but her spirit broken. They're recommending a court-martial, she said, her voice flat. Dishonorable discharge, at best. I wanted to fight, to scream, to do something. But what could I do against the Navy? Against Karen's vindictive meddling? That night, I confronted Karen. I marched across the street, my fists clenched, and pounded on her door. When she answered, her smug expression made my blood boil. Why? I demanded. Why can't you just leave us alone? She crossed her arms, unapologetic. I did what any good citizen would do. I saw something suspicious, and I reported it. You don't know what you've done, I said, my voice shaking. You've ruined her life. Karen's eyes narrowed. Maybe she shouldn't have been sneaking around then. I walked away before I did something I'd regret. But as I crossed the street, I saw Agent Harper's sedan parked at the end of the cul-de-sac, watching. The court-martial came and went. Elena fought hard, but the evidence, Karen's video, combined with the Navy's internal reports, was damning. She was stripped of her rank, her medals, her pension. Everything she'd worked for, gone in an instant. We tried to move on, to rebuild. But the neighborhood wasn't the same. Karen's smugness grew, her victory lap evident in every glance she threw our way. The other neighbors, once friendly, now avoided us, whispering behind closed doors. One night, as we sat in silence at the kitchen table, Elena spoke. I'm leaving, Marcus. I froze. What do you mean? I can't stay here, she said, her voice breaking. Not after this. Not with her across the street, gloating. Not with the Navy turning its back on me. I begged her to stay, to fight, to let me fight with her. But her mind was made up. The next morning, she was gone, leaving only a note. I love you, but I need to find myself again. I stood in our empty house, the weight of her absence crushing me. Karen had won, not because she was right, but because she'd wielded her ignorance like a weapon. And Elena, the strongest person I knew, had been broken not by war, but by a neighbor's petty vendetta. Nd.